Greetings. I am so excited to be back here live talking more about ADHD today. Before I get started in telling you about what I'm going to focus on today, I really wanted to start with talking about the three things that I do. I'm Dr. Adjoa Haku. I am a licensed clinical psychologist and also known as the inner peace doctor because throughout everything I do, I always focus on helping people cultivate inner peace. But within that, there are three main things I focus on. The first one is speaking. I absolutely love meeting with groups of people, doing what I like to call play shops instead of workshops, because what I do is always more interactive and fun than most workshops are. And in those play shops, I focus on cultivating inner peace. I have a zillion different techniques and I love sharing with audiences, especially audiences of busy people. How can you incorporate inner peace into your life? How do you keep stress, which happens to everyone? Everybody experiences stress. What I focus on is how to keep stress from becoming chronic stress, which turns into toxic stress, which turns into devastating things in our bodies, right? Toxic stress leads to diabetes or exacerbates these kinds of issues, diabetes, high blood pressure, all sorts of things. So that is the overarching thing that I do. And then there are two areas that are of special meaning and focus for me as well. There's the work around helping Black women because I am a Black woman. I'm a busy Black woman. I'm a Black woman that has considered myself a strong Black woman and determined to redefine what it means to be strong. Strong means self care first so that we can take care of our families, our communities, our jobs. And so, Sister Peace is the thing that I do that really focuses on Black women, bringing Black women together to help reduce stress together, but also focusing on some of the other issues that are especially ours, microaggressions, that intersection between being a woman and dealing with sexism issues, being a Black woman and dealing with microaggressions and other kinds of racial issues and being mom, wife, community member, our history in this country, our history across the world. So all of those things, that's under Sister Peace. And then the other thing that I do, which is focused on what we're here to talk about today, is ADHD coaching because I am surrounded by neurodiversity. I have neurodiversity. I am dyslexic. And so I understand from the inside, from my own experience of the struggles that one goes through when dealing with neurodiversity issues personally, and then my family. So many members of my family are also living with the challenges and the excitement of neurodiversity, including my youngest. And so after COVID and my youngest struggling, I really went deep into better understanding neurodiversity and for my little one, but also for my clients that were struggling with neurodiversity issues and really struggling around COVID. So that was what led me to dive deep to take a 50-hour course that helped me learn a lot more about the brain and how it works. And then a few courses after that, as well as reading a zillion books. So I love focusing on helping people with neurodiversity. So that brings us to today. In today's live, I'm going to focus on telling you three stories of the challenges that I've helped people with in my coaching work around neurodiversity. I'm going to tell you a story about a child first, children first. Actually, it's two children in this family. Children first, then someone that was in college, and then an adult. Between those stories, I thought it might be fun to break things up a little bit by talking more about some of the biggest questions I get. Why, as a clinical psychologist that could be doing therapy work, why am I choosing to do coaching? So I'm going to answer that question for you. And then I'm also going to talk more about what's special about what I do. What's special about this program? How is it different than other things? So, that being said, you have the lay of the land. You're going to hear three stories of families that I've worked with or people that I've worked with. And I'm going to answer two big questions. why coaching instead of therapy, and how is this coaching program different than a lot of other things. So let's get started. Let's start with my first coaching story. And oh, I should say before I go any further that I made sure that I removed anything that would be identifiable for these families, that people I'm talking about. So I'm gonna give you a name, but the name is not the name of the real person. And there is nothing that is identifying here. That these are coaching situations, real live people that I've worked with and helped, but I wanted to make sure to protect them, since this is public and everybody can hear about it. Although some of the people I worked with, as you can see from testimonials on my website, are really happy to talk about our work together. But I thought I wanted to really give you examples. And so that being said, let's start with the first. So we'll call her Lisa. Lisa's the mom of two boys, age 7 and 10. Right? Both boys diagnosed with ADHD. Lisa felt overwhelmed by the emotional roller coaster her family experienced. It was really challenging, to have her children have her youngest son was struggling with frequent emotional breakdowns, right? Difficulty regulating his emotions. So, throwing himself on the ground and, really having difficulty when things changed, something changed at the last minute, he would lose it. And that was exhausting, of course, for mom. And then her oldest son was also struggling with impulsivity and difficulty with organizing things. So getting assignments in on time, that kind of thing. And at 10, that's when you start to give more of that responsibility over to children to start to be in charge of some of that stuff. But he was really struggling with that. So Lisa came so frustrated, so overwhelmed, not quite sure how to navigate this world with these two children that were both, struggling with ADHD. The first thing I did was to help Lisa find her inner peace. Right? It's really hard when you're the parent and you're overwhelmed. If you're overwhelmed and you are setting the course for your family, then everybody else is going to be overwhelmed. So I started out teaching Lisa some breathing techniques to help her calm herself down and to find her inner peace. And then I taught her how to teach those techniques with her to her boys. And it became a family routine of practicing breathing techniques to help everybody find their inner peace. Right. And that was a wonderful foundation for us to do some other things. So I also coach Lisa in helping to build emotional resilience, with the boys, teaching them how to recognize when they were starting to become what we call emotionally dysregulated, right? When you're having, I also like to call it emotional storms, because it's like when the sky is clear and everything's nice, and all of a sudden there is a rainstorm, and sometimes that rainstorm comes with clouds and lightning and thunder, right? Well, that's kind of what it can be like when somebody's emotionally dysregulated. Everything seems fine. And then all of a sudden, they are crying or yelling and screaming. And everybody around them is like, what happened? Right. So the person, though, once they start to understand themselves better, and even again, this was a 7-year-old and a 10-year-old, even little people can start to learn to recognize those signs and learn to do something about them, like the breathing techniques, so that they can calm down. So I help people understand how those emotional storms, happen in the brain, what happens when people get dysregulated, and the powerful techniques they can use to get regulated again. And even somebody as young as 7 can understand this stuff. So, but I focus on, at this moment, teaching parents and empowering parents to work with their children, and therefore teach their children. And one of the reasons why that's so important to me is because when you empower a parent and you help them understand what's going on, understand how the ADHD brain, works, then they are empowered for the time they're working with you, but they're empowered for the rest of their lives, the rest of their children's childhoods. A 7-year-old and a 10-year-old. I'm not trying to set it up so that Lisa would have been working with me for the next 10 years, right? Until her 7-year-old got through high school or college. What I'm striving to do is help Lisa understand enough about what's going on, feel empowered, have the tools so that she can negotiate things right now while she's working with me, but also as things change, as they do, right? The 7 and 10-year-olds are going to be different when they get to high school, going to be different when they get to college. But we created the foundation together so that she would be able to help them negotiate those other educational spaces much better, help them figure out what careers might be best for them, that kind of thing. So, back to Lisa's story and her two boys. The next thing after we got some emotional regulation going for Lisa primarily, but also her teaching and working with her boys, the next thing I did was help Lisa identify what their superpowers were. Why superpowers? Superpowers are so important because for a parent, having a child that is struggling, we are only being a parent, I can say for myself, but this is true, I think, of most parents. We're only as happy as our happiest child, right? So when our children are struggling, we're struggling. When we see something as a disorder, then it's really part of what's happening is, our hearts are broken. Our children are disordered. I like to really get people focused on superpowers, the strength, the possibilities here. And that is a way to mind shift away from disorders and challenges into strengths and possibilities. So, together we identified her children's superpowers. The youngest one, his superpower was empathy. Okay? He was the one that was always uh, knew what to say to a friend that was sad. Right? He was very connected to those around him emotionally, and that empathy is a superpower. And the oldest one, his superpower was creativity. Right? He had a very creative mind, thought outside of the box. But those both superpowers, if you don't understand them, then they can sometimes get in the way. I think the empathy is one of the reasons why the little one had a lot of emotional breakdowns, right? Not only experiencing his emotions, but kind of sometimes being flooded by other people around him. So helping him better understand that was important. And the oldest one, being really creative, sometimes that creativity needs a little help applying that creativity to schoolwork and helping him understand how you can still apply your creativity to schoolwork so that it doesn't feel so boring and so that you can get it done. So, identifying those and identifying them for Lisa was really important because it helped her start to see her children in a different light. Where before we identified them, it seemed like she felt like there was always struggles. It was always she was frustrated and sad. When I started to help her identify these superpowers, the empathy, the creativity, she started to look at her children differently and she started to really notice and hone in on those times, experiences, stories when her boys were being empathetic and creative, which helped her feel better about them. And that also helped her communicate to them. Right? So they started feeling better about themselves as well. She was able to say, "Oh my gosh, look at what you created. This is so beautiful." And able to say it not just in that moment, but to remind her little one of this creative power and how that creative power can be used. So I helped her first advocate with the school, really helping her talk to the teachers, talk to the counselors, but from a place of strength and advocacy and helping her advocate for her boys. Like, this is what my son needs. He's empathetic, he's very connected, so he needs to be in spaces and places where he can connect with others. How can we do that? He needs to be with teachers that understand his empathy. So those kinds of things where she's really was able to think about what her children needed in a different way and then advocate with the school to try to make those things happen, to work closely with the teachers to make things happen, to communicate more with them about what her sons needed and what the teachers needed, right? Because it's definitely teachers need certain amount of work, but then let's collaborate in how we can get this done. right? So there are all sorts of, and it's of course not enough time to talk about how many resources can be available, but the main thing is for a parent to feel empowered to go in and ask for the resources and to keep asking until things are figured out so that their child is feeling successful in school. So we did that. We talked about that, and that came up, over and over again until Lisa felt like she had a handle on it. The other thing was working with Lisa to create systems for the family. Now, these two boys, both diagnosed with ADHD, but having different representations of ADHD, which, every person is different, wanted to make sure that Lisa created strategies for her family that worked for her family. Because it would have been really difficult for her to do one set of things for the 7-year-old and a whole different set of things for the 10-year-old. That wasn't going to work, right? Lisa was feeling overwhelmed when she started. I didn't want to make her feel more overwhelmed. So we created strategies that work for the whole family, like creating a visual schedule as a family so that everybody had some idea of what was going on. That was really wonderful because one of the things that can be dysregulating for people living with ADHD is when things change at the last minute, not knowing what's coming up. So having a visual schedule was so helpful for the family to know, for Lisa to be on top of things, to be organized, to understand what was going on so that she could help the boys stay on top of things and manage time better. We also use other time management strategies like using a timer to help make those shifts, which really helps smooth out the morning schedule when, setting a timer. Okay, we've got 15 minutes before we leave. In 15 minutes, we're going to do a breathing technique before we walk out the door. Those kinds of strategies really helped Lisa manage the family better and help the boys understand what was expected of them, to look forward to doing breathing techniques together as a family, and to start to see their own genius and to start to own that. And when people feel better, they tend to do better. Right. So as the boys became more empowered, as their mom became more empowered, she was able to empower them. As they became more empowered, then it was easier for them to, one, do the things that were expected of them, and two, to communicate with mom when they reached any roadblocks so that together they could brainstorm how to get out of them. So Lisa ultimately felt equipped and empowered to embrace her role as a nurturing and empathetic parent, which is really hard to do when you're in that frustrated space. And the goal here is to move from frustration and fear to peace and productivity. And we were able to do that, Lisa and I together, working together, we're able to get her from frustration and fear, frustration about not being able to get these things done, not being able to get her children to do the things that needed to be done, and fear about their future, right? Which all parents are concerned about our children's future. By the end, she felt empowered. She embraced her role as a nurturing and empathetic mom and was able to have peace and able to get the productivity going. So the journey went very well. And again, always there's ups and downs and challenges along the way, but part of what creates resiliency is working through those challenges together. Whew. So okay, that was story number one of family with children. And I said that between I would answer big questions. So, one question I get all the time as a licensed clinical psychologist, people are always approaching me for therapy, right? Therapy where they can use their insurance to see me and to get my help. Therapy is wonderful, and I love being a therapist. But what I found is that as a therapist, part of what happens is we are educated to focus on disorders and treating disorders. I don't like to look at ADHD as a disorder. I think when you look at and focus on ADHD being a disorder, then you're also focusing on somebody being broken. I like to focus on the neurodiversity. Right. So instead of, I wish I could rename ADHD. Right. I didn't come up with the term. It's the term we have. I try to focus on the letters and not what each letter means. The formal term is attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. And I like to think of it as attention difference, hyperactivity, divergence. If I could rename ADHD, that's what those letters would stand for, because difference and divergence focus on the fact that things are different. The brain is set up differently, but not in a disordered way, in a way that just to understand that difference is not bad, right? It's just different. And that just requires different strategies. So, focusing on coaching helps me put the focus on the strategies that I know work without having to focus on disorders. If I bill somebody's insurance, I have to put in a diagnosis, right? There's certain restrictions to how many sessions might be paid for and so forth. When I create a coaching program, I can put in all the things that I know work in the order and the system that I know works. So that's the main reason why I focus on coaching. Right? It allows me to bring all the gifts, talents, and experience and education that I have as a clinician, but it also gives me the flexibility to create a program and strategy that I know works, that focuses on empowering people, not making them feel like they have a disorder, but empowering them to have the tools they need in order to move past fear and frustration to peace and productivity. All right, so I hope that answered that question. Now let's talk about Emily, one of my college students. And I love working with college students. I think I love working with college students out of everybody the most, because I used to be a professor. I've taught since I was in graduate school. I was an adjunct professor and have taught at quite a few different colleges, and I love teaching. So I really understand. And I was a college student. Oh my gosh, I like to tell my children I was a professional college student. Right, between getting an undergraduate degree and then a master's on the way to my PhD, and I'm a lifelong learner. I absolutely love constantly learning. And so I love college. I love being on college campuses, and I love working with college students. So, Emily, a college student living with ADHD, was struggling with staying engaged during lectures. Right? Lectures can be long, and depending on the professor, sometimes they can be really exciting and interesting, and sometimes they can be a little more dry and challenging. And that's for everybody, but it was especially difficult for Emily to stay engaged during lectures, and she was also having difficulty during study sessions. So we started coaching together. I was working again. She started frustrated, right? And in fear that she might not be able to make it through college because of her inability to concentrate, which was affecting her academic performance. It was also affecting her self confidence, right? She wasn't feeling really good about herself and wondering, why is it that everybody else around me seems to be able to do this, but I can't? So with Emily, we started with what's her superpower. And her superpower was also creativity, right? Emily had a wonderful ability to think outside of the box. And so we use that creativity as part of our strategies to help Emily do better in school. I had Emily make sure she got to a chair at the front of the room, right? Because it's a little easier to focus when you're in front. There are fewer distractions. When you sit further back, then you are distracted by all the people in front of you, including whatever might else be going on. So sit in front, to do a little bit of breathing at the beginning of class to try to stay focused. To when she found herself wandering and not focusing on the teacher, we came up with some strategies that helped her get focused again. We had her advocate for herself every college has an office for different abilities. They call it different things, but every college has an office. So making sure that she was advocating for herself, that she went to that office for special services. Emily actually was able to get permission to have recordings done for her classes. And not all professors like to be recorded for various reasons, but that was one of the things that she was able to get. And that worked for Emily really well, because if she got distracted, she was able to listen again, and she would listen while she was walking, and that was helpful. And then she would mark down times if she was walking and she noticed it was something that she hadn't heard before, so that she could go back to it and take some notes or fill in her notes. But she found that like just listening while she was walking was helpful in capturing any information that she might have missed. So that was really helpful for Emily. um, using her creativity, we came up with other things, tools that she could use, like using mind maps and visual aids to help her in studying for classes. And of course, this depended on which class, but I helped her to learn systems so that then she'd be able to apply it to any class. So Emily and I have only worked together for a year, but a year is all she needed in order to get the systems down, to feel more confident, to feel empowered, to move from fear and frustration to peace and productivity, so that she was able to finish. She began working with me in her sophomore year after really struggling freshman year, barely making it out of freshman year. And last I heard, Emily graduated with honors because all of this stuff worked. She worked with me for 1 year, and she was able to, by after that year, by junior and senior year, she had the techniques down so she could apply them to different classes as things came up. Anyway, other things I did with Emily is I helped her use her artistic talent as an outlet. So she took up drawing and writing, and these were ways for her to express herself. These were ways for her to deal with any anxieties or strong emotions as they came up. And they were also great stress relievers. I had her increase her physical activity, which is another great stress reliever. In fact, it's something I think everybody with ADHD should do, is some physical activity. In fact, I one of the many books that I read was all about the power of movement. For everything. And there were, I think it was more than one chapter where they focused on ADHD and how moving is so wonderful for the brain. So basically, I guess I gave you the end of the story already. She graduated with honors. She improved her ability to participate in class. She improved her confidence, which is one of the biggest things, and her ability to advocate for herself, her ability to have tools to get through the challenging things, and she did very well. So that is Emily's story. Okay, so oh my gosh, time is flying. But I'm going to keep going because I've scheduled a half an hour, but I can be here a little longer. And that is all okay. So I wanted to talk about the difference in what I do. And this was really highlighted for me just recently when I was on a discovery call with somebody who was approaching me. They actually contacted me because someone had referred them to me, looking as they were looking for a clinician. And this woman identified that her child has ADHD. And so I thought, we can talk about this coaching program. And so we did. She started the session crying. I gave her some breathing techniques right in the moment to help her find her inner peace. We were able to talk about the challenges. One of the things that was really remarkable was that this family had already worked with, no lie, at least seven clinicians, psychiatrists, to try to help the family. And just in I think we talked for about a half an hour. Just in that half an hour, she'd not been given breathing techniques to help her find her peace, which helps navigate these difficult situations. So that was new. Uh, I helped her understand, how superpowers work with ADHD, and how just basically how the ADHD brain is wired in general. And we identified her child's superpower, which was also creativity. And so she had aha moments in that, again, half an hour with me, and said that in all of these people that she worked with over all of these years, nobody had helped her understand more how her child's brain is wired, which requires some different techniques. Nobody had helped her find her inner peace in order to help her negotiate these things better. So what I offer is, I that was a highlight to me. I was like, all right, yeah. You when you do these things, sometimes it's like, you can't see the forest for the trees. You're so in it that you forget what you're offering is so different. So what I offer is community. I put together a coaching program because I think it's so important for community. One of the things that parents are often talking about is how embarrassed they feel, how challenged it is, how the other people around them, their children are all doing well. it is so important to have other people around you that are going through similar things, just so that you can say, you know what, text somebody, call somebody, this is what happened today, so that you have somebody else that can empathize with you and connect with you and share with you. So, community is so important. Another thing, education. I strongly believe knowledge is power. I know that that's how it's worked for me and how it's worked with countless people that I work with. When you understand what's going on, when you better understand how this brain works differently than somebody else's, that empowers you to do something different. So, understanding is one of the other things I make sure people get, and not in a you're going back to college dry way. Again, everything I do, I try to make it as interactive as fun as possible. So really trying to help people understand how their brains work, how their children's brains work, and what techniques are effective and what techniques are not effective. But not only what works and what doesn't work, but why. And it's important to understand why, because when you understand why, then you can also apply that to something else, right? You can take this knowledge with you and apply it to other things. It's empowering. So, uh, inner peace is everything that I do is about cultivating inner peace. So, incorporating those strategies, the breathing techniques, and a zillion other tools that I have, so that people can find the tools that work for them in order to find peace in the moment, especially the moments of challenge, to keep their stress level low overall, and to figure out how to bring that stress level down when there have been moments of challenge. So, incorporating inner peace. And then the fourth thing that I do that's different is focus on positivity, right? Focus on the superpower. Again, when you focus on there being a disorder, you're focusing on people being broken. You're putting so much emphasis on the challenge that people feel broken. When you focus on the positivity, when you focus on the gratitude, when you focus on the superpower, that helps everybody feel better. And when everybody feels better, and when everybody has some clear sense of strength, then it's much easier to apply that to other things. It's so much easier to have hope. So, superpower, inner peace, education, and community. Those are the four components that really make my coaching program different than so many other possibilities in dealing with ADHD. All right, last story, and then if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. This is a story of an adult. Alex is what we'll call him. Alex was a dynamic individual struggling with ADHD and working in a corporate setting. He often felt overwhelmed by the demands of the job and the need to conform to rigid routines um, in his job, right? So during our coaching, we explored, of course, his strengths and his passions, first starting with his superpower, inspiring others with his infectious enthusiasm and innovative thinking, right? So he was such a dynamic person and so passionate about work that it was easy for him to inspire others. But Alex didn't even realize that. And so after we explored, then I helped him realize that. And one of the most fun things about this coaching program is I created a self assessment that can help you to discover what your superpower is, or figure out what your children's superpower is, so that you can do that right away. That's one of the first things that we do to make sure everybody knows what their superpower is, so that we can start applying the specific tools that work to bring that superpower into shifting the challenges. So, anyway, with Alex, we realized that his superpower was infectious enthusiasm and innovative thinking. We used that to infuse his projects with more creativity, right? We really brainstormed how he can get that creativity into the projects so they didn't feel so dry and boring to him, which really helped. We used that superpower to help him motivate his team. Right? He wasn't doing all this stuff by himself. And for Alex to really identify which things he needed to delegate, right? He didn't need to do everything himself. He had to empower himself and be comfortable with delegating things to his team members, some of which their strength was getting some of the boring paperwork done that was hard for him. So we did that. We created systems together that worked so that he was okay with delegating, okay, and had all of the support that he needed, right? Which included daily check-ins, with staff members, because that kind of connection with people helped keep him excited about the projects. Right? Soon he began to get noticed because he went from trying to hide in the background, trying to hide that he wasn't getting stuff done, to really putting himself out there. And then before we finished our work together, he got promoted, and it was so wonderful. I was so excited and happy for him. But I was excited and happy for him because he wasn't trying to be somebody else anymore. He wasn't trying to hide anymore. What he was doing was taking his natural gifts and using them and feeling empowered to use them, but also feeling empowered to say, okay, this is not my gift. Let me figure out a way to get it done. Is a way to get it done to delegate it to somebody else? Is a way to get it done to connect with somebody so that we can do it together? Whatever it takes, he had the tools. So proud of Alex. So that is my story, or the stories of people, three people that I worked with. I've worked with many, many others, and uh, it's always fun to help people find their superpower. And it's always so exciting for me to see how excited they are when they realize this thing that's been causing all of this fear and frustration is actually just a different way the brain is wired and comes with its own gifts. So the last thing that I'll say, I don't see any questions. So the last thing I'll say is kind of silly, but I did say that I try to bring the fun to everything. So hang with me for this one. One of the ways I've always liked to bring fun, interest to things is to incorporate movies, literature, like the world, because psychology is in everything. The motivation behind every character and every movie and every book that's related to psychology. And as I was thinking about talking today, I thought, who has ADHD that people that nobody's ever formally diagnosed, and this is a fictional character anyway. So I don't know. I don't think anybody's ever formally diagnosed this fictional character. And yes, I said a fictional character. So can you even diagnose a fictional character? I don't believe in diagnosis anyway. So let me just say that I think Sherlock Holmes would be considered somebody living with the challenges of ADHD. And when I think of Sherlock Holmes, which happens to be one of my favorite fictional characters, and Sherlock Holmes, this character has come up in so many different places and ways, over the many, many years since Sir Arthur Conan Doyle first invented the character, and that there's lots of a couple of different TV shows, one American, one European that I can think of, English show in the last 10 years that were both versions of Sherlock, but also many other characters. One of the things is that when Sherlock is on a case, he's hyper focused. Hyper focus would be Sherlock's superpower if I had to, help him around these issues. And when he's on a case, hyper focus, all in, can put things together in such creative, out of the box ways that other people can't see. But when he's not on a case, right, he tends to be more depressed and anxious. The original character, Sherlock Holmes, was challenged with some addiction issues, right? So, and Watson was kind of his executive functioning, kind of his coach, the person that supported him, that helps him deal with all of the things that he couldn't deal with well, so that he could be in his zone of genius. I say that because I truly believe that people living with ADHD have their zones of genius just like we all do. And that as a mom, one of the things that I do is I am that support. I am the Holmes, the Watson, sorry, the Watson to my little one's Holmes. Who my little one is an incredible genius, now has great interest in law and acting, right? So that creativity, I'd say creativity and empathy are my little one's superpowers. What works best is when I help set up the systems, when we create these systems together, And then my little one is flourishing and doing well. Anybody that is a Sherlock type person, and you may not, and one of the reasons why I bring Sherlock up is because, especially if you're my age or older, you may not have had this idea that this is one of the challenges you face. You know that you've always had difficulty getting things done, finishing projects. You lose track of time. Like you kind of know those things. And some people have figured out ways around them all on their own, and some people haven't. So I'm hoping that you might, maybe you identify with people like Sherlock that are incredible geniuses when they are focused on the right things but struggle in other areas, to know that with the right strategies, with the right support, with the right community, you can be as incredible as Sherlock was, but he was focused on the things that empowered him, the things that excited him. And so that's what I do. I help people identify their superpowers, understand how their brains work, have community, create community, be in community that are supportive to them, have inner peace, feel empowered so that they have all the tools they need in order to flourish. I help people move from fear and frustration to peace and productivity. Thank you so much for joining me for this live. I hope that it answered many of your questions. Please check out the page draku.com 80/ADHD, where you'll find some other free tools for to help you on your road to moving from fear and frustration to peace and productivity, as well as a link to sign up to have a one-on-one conversation with me, free, no obligation. And if nothing else, you will leave with a breathing technique that will help you to cultivate your inner peace. Thank you.